Where did Sherry go?
Hopefully she'll maybe. Oh, I think her camera blinked out or something. She said, "Well, let's go ahead and we're actually live now." So, sorry about the delay,
Okay.
folks, and the technical difficulties. Hopefully, Sherry will. Oh, looks like she is trying to join from another device. Device is not connected. Not sure what happened there. I see her twice now, but it's saying one of them is saying device is not connected, and the other one is saying, whoops. Well, hopefully she'll try to get back in. Oh, there she is. There we go. Hey, there's our Sherry.
Sorry, my computer just quit.
Oh, things happen.
Just said done.
Okay, so we're here today.
There she is.
So we're here today to continue our conversation on Valentin Tomberg's Meditations on the Tarot. This time we are dealing with letter 14, Temperance. And like the first thought I had, like as I was reflecting after I finished my reading of it this morning, I was like, oh, this is probably the letter where Sherry realized she'd been a Hermeticist all along. I couldn't help but think of you a lot, Sherry, when I read this letter.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't feel like a Hermeticist last night in the voice channel on the Discord.
Oh, really?
And I had to think a lot about it because Tyler was on and he was asking the question, what do you do about the coming wave? Like, how do you, and it's like a total practical application. Okay, so we have all this knowledge, right, as Christians, and then you have this, well, let's just call it the machine, for brevity's sake, coming at you. What do you do? How do you deal with your neighbor if he wants to build a fence on your, a meter into your property or something like? And I couldn't, first of all, you can't give a person a particular answer for their life. I don't know, maybe someone disagrees with me on this, but I'm always so hesitant to tell someone what to do when it comes to something, unless of course it's a more, what's the word? Spiritual, broad, exercise love, exercise patience, exercise humility, those kinds of answers I can give. But, a particular, maybe, I don't know. I got really confused in that conversation yesterday because I just kept thinking of the story of the rich young ruler, right? Because in that story, he wants a particular answer from Christ. Right? He says, what can I do to be better? And Jesus says, just keep doing what you're doing. That's his first answer to him. And then he presses Jesus, right? And then Jesus says, well, sell everything you have and give it to the poor. And the way
Okay, not that answer. That's not the answer I was looking for.
Yeah, that's right. But see, the reason I think that that's not the answer is because tradition has it that that's Barnabas. And Barnabas ends up later in his life doing that, selling everything he has and giving it to the poor. And so I have this, the way I look at that story is that Jesus essentially told him what was coming towards the end of his life, not the life that he was now living. And so he went away sad because how can you actually, you can't integrate that answer because you haven't gotten there yet. You know what I'm saying? Something like that. And so to give somebody a particular answer, at least from where I'm standing, is going to make them sad because they don't have the life experience to understand why they would even want to do that thing. You see, something like that. So anyway, this is maybe not on topic. Maybe it is, but
well, actually, I think I see it as being on topic in two ways of things that are discussed in this chapter. One, there's a what do we do when things are really bad, which kind of ties to Tomberg's conditional defense of Bernard of Clairvaux's association with the Crusades, where Tomberg views the Crusades as like essentially a defense of Christianity within Western Europe, and that without the Crusades, that Christianity might have befallen the same fate that happened to Eastern Christianity, where the Eastern Christian world was largely conquered by Islam. So he just gives this kind of conditional defense. So it ties to that. I would disagree strongly with Tomberg on that particular point.
I thought you
would. But it's still a really meaningful question that is not easy to answer and deserves to be considered seriously.
Yeah.
Do I really just die? My answer is yes, you do.
Yeah,
really just die.
Too. Yeah.
But I understand the difficulty of the question.
Yes.
I really do.
Yeah.
So it's related in that way. And then the other way it's related is when you were talking about like about the not wanting to give these like easy answers.
Mm-hmm.
It's related to this entire process that he's talking about in the chapter about blood and sweat and tears.
Right. Yeah. That's
because
good.
You wanted to give an answer that would encourage someone toward one of those paths.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe not the one, maybe they were looking for, maybe what they needed was something that would put him on the path of the other than what they were looking for, which is what I think is the case in the case of the rich young ruler. He seems to have had a kind of Pelagian kind of mindset, right? So he's all about the blood. He's all about the blood part, but that's not what he needed.
Yeah.
So Jesus didn't give him the answer that he was looking for. He was trying to make him see the need to have the unity of all those things. And people probably have no idea what I'm talking about now because I'm talking about concepts that are in the chapter that we haven't explained.
Yeah, we're jumping. We're jumping right straight into the middle of the whole thing. Yeah,
that's right.
But I just wanted to show you how it wasn't actually as tangential as you thought.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, it was. It really preoccupied me, like that whole interaction, because I kind of. Yeah. Anyway, I'll just leave it. Yeah, that's right, Luke. Yeah.
Is there a way that I can just like have it automatically? Do I have to manually show all the?
No, you have to manually show.
Oh, that's hard. That's okay. Can I put a link in case Luke wants to join us? How do I do that?
Okay, so you go to.
Do I post it as a comment?
You go to invite, and then
I go to invite and just.
I don't know how to pin it. I couldn't figure that out, but I just dropped it in. I pasted it into the chat.
Okay. Well, we don't want to make it. There we go. Just in case.
Mm-hmm.
Whoop. There we go. All right. So it's there. People can scroll up and find it if they need to.
Yeah.
All right. So technical problem solved. First time. This is the first time I've used this new platform. Sherry's used it once before. This is my first time. So the temperance, since I already started talking about the blood, sweat, and tears,
mm-hmm.
Tomberg's overall thesis is that the arcanum of temperance is about tears, which he ties to inspiration. And I couldn't help but think about like what we do all the time, to be honest with you, like, and you in particular, Sherry, because you're so good at being persistent with the question, but having no idea, but not thinking you know the answer,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And making space for inspiration in every conversation you have. So that's one of the reasons that I thought about you a lot as I read this chapter, because that is the overarching theme.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
And that is kind of what we talked about last night, actually, in that chat, because afterwards I was saying that essentially what's happening in a conversation like that, when someone is saying, tell me what to do, and you don't tell them what to do, it's a kind of a withdrawal away from them so that they can expand themselves out toward you, right? Like it's if that makes any sense, it's like what agape does, right? It's like what actually I read out of Tom Berg's last chapter, the calling forth of Lazarus, right? It's something like that. And calling something into being, you know, if you give them an answer, you filled up their space in a sense, you know. But if you don't give them an answer, you've given them space in order to explore and find the answer. And I mean, life experience has taught me that people don't do what you tell them to do. They do what they figure out on their own, you know?
And that's a really useful pedagogical tool. I mean, when I was a Waldorf teacher, even now as a professor, you know, students will say, "Mr. Martin, what's this mean?" And I never give them the answer. I don't know. What do you think it means? Because usually they don't want you to tell them anyway.
No.
You know, this is my experience. My advice is don't give advice, right? Because when people ask you, they want somebody to listen, usually is what it is.
Yeah.
And so I think that's as a Waldorf teacher, that was a really fruitful pedagogical tool. You know, if the kid comes up and says, "Why do you think the sun is up, you know, that color, Mr. Martin?" And I don't really know the answer, but I could say, "Well, because helium burns it," whatever. But I didn't say that. I said, "Well, what do you think?" And they would think about it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that kind of, you know, for children, you know, we used to always say self-imposed homework is the best kind, you know, where you leave them with something to let it grow in their souls. But with people asking for advice or telling me what to do, and we all know that never works. You know what I mean? Never works. But which is why I think you're right in trying to create a space for the soul to inhabit. Right? You can in a way, rather than, because the thing is with giving advice, at least in my experience, it's like you're inserting yourself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like it's like an invasion.
Right.
You know what I mean? But if you kind of open up a space there for the answer to come, you know, it's almost it being sincere in everything too, not blowing it off. I mean, feeling empathy for the person who has the question, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, giving advice never works.
You know, what comes to my mind right now is I had a conversation with Jacob, who's Jewish, and we were talking about conversionism, and this is slightly related because Judaism is not conversionist, right? So, and the reason for that is because he said it would violate the three main commandments: fornication, murder, and idolatry. And then he explained that essentially what I think, this is how I perceived it, is that you drag, everyone has a God of their own understanding, essentially, right? Because we all have a conception in our own minds that is difficult to share with others. And so you drag that person towards the God of your understanding. And in so doing, some form of fornication is happening there, and murder, right? Because you're killing them in a way. And then participating in idolatry because it is a God of your own understanding, right? And I thought that is such an interesting way to look at it. I know not everybody agrees with that, but I think the same thing applies to giving someone advice, like inserting yourself into, you know, you should, you know, we call that shitting all over yourself or something like that.
So we've
Chris
said
nailed
the time. Yep. Amen. So we established that Tom Berg says that the primary theme of this arcanum is related to the gift of tears and to inspiration. And you were talking about talking to Jacob, a Jewish guy who's very active on this corner of the internet. Who are you friends with him?
Yeah.
Friendly with him?
Oh yes.
We're not so friendly, but I still respect him though. But in any case, this is what Tomberg says. Interestingly enough, he actually traces the gift of tears directly to the Jewish people. He actually says before the Jewish people, the gift of tears did not exist.
Yeah.
He says now the gift of tears is a comparatively recent spiritual phenomenon in the history of human spirituality. In the ancient world, one only wept ritually, i.e., through verbal lamentations and through prescribed gestures of mourning or grief. And it was amongst the chosen people, Israel, that real weeping began. Mm-hmm. It was a manifestation of the share that the chosen people had in the mission of preparing for the coming of Christ, who wept at the time of Lazarus's resuscitation and who sweated blood and sweat the night in the Garden of Olives. The real weeping came to have its rudimentary origin from the womb of this people, and to the present day, the Jews preserve, cultivate, and respect the gift of tears. In fact, every revelation in the narrative of the Zohar is preceded or accompanied by weeping of the one who had it and who comes to share it with the others. And more recently, it was the same with the Tzaddikim of the Hasidim of Eastern Europe and the Weeping Wall in Jerusalem. Therefore, we owe to this people not only the Bible, not only Christ in the flesh, and not only the work of the apostles, but also the gift of tears, warm and sincere, which is the vivifying fluid that emanates from contact between image and likeness in us. Anti-Semitism, good Lord, he then says.
Yeah.
As if it's unthinkable.
I like how he invokes the honor thy father and mother commandment after he.
Yeah, right. Yes, exactly. And then later on, it's like, that's how he views. That's how he views. And that's. I think that's actually kind of like when I say that I see Christianity and Judaism as part of a continuous tradition. Like that's a better way of expressing exactly how the relationship exists. It is of a parent-child. It is a parent-child relationship, but it's an unbreakable relationship nonetheless.
Yeah,
like that's not a severable bond. So,
Michael, what? I mean, I know you've gone through this book a million times and you're so familiar with it. What is it about this chapter that you love the most?
I don't know if I love the most, but I mean, the things that sticks with me is the angelology.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And actually later when he connect the three crosses, that always struck me as important: the crucifix, the rose cross, and the silver
cross,
rose, or the gold cross with the silver rose. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But the angel, what really struck me this time though was where did it go? When he's talking about how angels are typically depicted as winged females.
Yeah.
Or
guardian angels,
whatever, right?
Guardian angels specifically.
Right. And the guardian angel defends his protege like a mother defends her child. Yeah. It is a mystery of maternal love which lives in the heart of the guardian angel. This is why traditional art presents them as winged females. And this is why. And then he later, bottom of the same page, 377. I would like you, dear unknown friend, to think of the angels as entities in whom prevails either the tenderness of maternal love or the justice of paternal love. And what it is a matter of is not to project earthly sexuality upon heaven, but rather, on the contrary, to see in the former a reflection, although often disfigured, of the polarity from above. And even a little bit farther, he goes, true chastity is not to refuse to look at, to see, or even to deny, but rather to see the celestial prototypes through and beyond things here below. And it is this chastity that one finds and apprehends in the Zohar, the book of splendor of the Jewish Kabbalah. And so, I mean, this for me is a profoundly sociological statement in that basically what he's going back to Genesis when God says, let us make man in our image, male and female made he them, right? And the position I'm sticking with is that when God says "let us," He's speaking to Sophia. So let us make man in our image, male and female, created He them. That coincides with Proverbs 8 when at the creation where Sophia accompanies God. So I think that's important, and I think this kind of biblical gendered typology is the antidote to all the madness in our world right now, as far as gender goes. And I think, I mean, to me, it's a spiritual principle, and I think, unfortunately, the way it filtered through history, and I am not a deconstructionist by any stretch of the imagination, but I think a lot of the gender madness that's going on right now needs to be laid at the feet of the church, because in all the churches, right? in the way that
by becoming materialists, it lost the meaning.
Not materialist, but becoming a boys' club, right?
Well, but also becoming materialist and forgetting how to read things like, St. Paul's, "In Christ there is neither male nor female," and to cast that in materialist terms.
Well, and
so I would say, I would say that viewing that gender typology as strictly a duality is also wrong, because again, remember Tom is here talking about polarity,
right,
and not duality. So there's something that unites that. Polarity has something that has something ineffable which unites it, even though it appears to be a duality.
That's why he likes Jung so much, in the idea of the anima and the animus, right? And but I think to go back to my point is I think what happened, and people I know a lot of people we're friends with and we know and we love really get all gung ho about how Christianity kind of inculcated or assimilated a kind of a Neoplatonist philosophy into it, and I think, well, it was good, but it was bad, right? And one of the bad things was that in Platonic philosophy, women are an inferior species. This is straight out of the Symposium, right? And that love between a man and a woman was seen as procreative, but not necessarily an equal love. And in the Symposium, at least in one of the iterations of the argument, is that a love between a man and a younger man is better because they're of an equal spiritual stature. And I think that kind of infected Christian thinking, and even as early as the Church Fathers, it did, where there were some of the Church Fathers who even questioned whether women had souls, or they have souls that were equal to men's. It was not universal, but there were a few out there that who were espousing that, and I think, and that's why I think what he's getting to here, and I've been thinking about this a lot, with especially in the light of the madness in our world right now. I mean, I often contemplate, Saint Michael battling with the fallen angels, because I think we're almost at that point, boys and girls, and I think, where is the space for that? And I think now I was just kind of primed to read this, to take this interpretation, because not only of the times, but I was writing earlier this morning. I was writing a blog post on the book Children of Men. Did you ever read that book, of Children of Men?
I only saw the movie.
Which I didn't like the movie.
I have
a
question
fantastic.
I want to ask you, though, about Tomberg's own language in that section that you were just referencing. So he talks about the guardian angel being like a perfect representation of maternal love, and then explains that, like, this is why Mary is the queen of the angels, because she's even higher, because her maternal love is even higher than that of the guardian angels. And so he's using all this feminine language, but then he uses the pronoun him exclusively when talking about the angel. How do you want to talk about that in terms of what you were just talking about the Bible's gender typology?
No, well, that's where I was riffing on is when he gets to the bottom of that page, when he talks about he contrasts the tenderness of maternal love the angels as entities in whom prevails either the tenderness of maternal love or the justice of paternal love. That's what I was drawing, and
But
not
he still
on the
refers to
guardian angel.
the guardian angels who associates with who he says is a feminine image
Right.
on the card, like
Right.
the temper. We should at some point we should probably show the image on the card. It is a feminine looking angel, right? On the card, and he says that this angel expresses maternal love. But if you look at when he actually uses a pronoun to refer to the angel,
No.
oh, that's I love that you call it in. That's
Jinx,
so
buy
awesome.
me a Coke. Yeah.
Jinx, yeah. Yours is colored. That's why I took mine down.
I colored
But
it,
he
yeah.
still uses the pronoun him. And
But
that actually startled me when I was reading it. I'm like, you
Well, I
just
think
talked about what's going on there.
Mhm. Yeah.
Slip at the tongue.
Well, I'm going to
Slip at the tongue.
I don't think so because he does it consistently.
Well, if you are my students, I
It's not
could
just a
mean
singular
anything.
mistake. He consistently says him about the angel as his pronoun choice, even
I
though
never
he
know.
just described it as a feminine image.
So the angels have they put their pronouns on their Instagram page. But
Or Tom Berg.
don't judge me. Yeah.
Well, I think he's like.
I think it's because
I think he's pointing toward the polarity, which is this is the thing that surprised me. He starts off the chapter talking about polarity, and I'm like, oh, okay. Tom Berg was influenced by Steiner. So I'm like thinking because of the big deal that Barfield makes out of polarity, I'm thinking, oh, he's going to kind of go into polarity and talk about how it relates to evolution of consciousness, and he doesn't go there at all. He just kind of references it early and then drops the subject.
Right. I think he's probably using that to emphasize that angels are not human.
Mm.
And I don't know, maybe, and I don't know what it was in the French that he read, but I mentioned
So that
the
the actual right, so that
masculine
right, so that the actual like human gender binary does not apply to angels.
Well, yeah, it's also like in a
Even though they can seem to have either masculine or feminine energies associated with them, they don't have any actual gender, which is why he chooses the masculine pronoun.
well, that's like in a
Because
Hebrew,
he's an old sexist guy who uses the masculine pronoun by default.
That could be what he's doing. I mean, that's certainly a possibility, right?
That was totally facetious.
Why does he say man and not human beings, right?
Right.
But I think this is an interesting antinomy because if you know the Hebrew word Elohim, right, which is plural, but which is plural masculine, but the singular is Eloha, which is feminine, which is kind of one of those bizarre things in the Old Testament, right? How do you do that? What do we do?
Yeah, but maybe it's not about the actual. It's more like you were saying, Nate. It's the energy, right? It's talking about the energy because there is no. You can't. Well, isn't it a non-corporeal being, right? So like it doesn't have a body, it doesn't have a I mean not the same one we do anyway, so
no, and also you would have to think that this idea of polarity and this kind of Rosicrucian principle that, and I think this is what Jung's doing with the anima and the animus as well, is you could be the butch guy in the world, but someplace in that there's still the feminine. It might be undeveloped or hidden.
because I think this points toward the unity of the coincidence of opposites in God ultimately, and I think that the way that gets resolved in Christianity is Christologically, and I especially think that since I'm getting ready to talk to Jordan Daniel Wood right after this, and that's what his whole book is about.
Well, and Jakob Burma also delves into this, right, where the original Adam, in his interpretation, was not, I wouldn't say hermaphrodite, but when Eve is taken out of his body, right, from his rib, he thought that the original person was very platonic in that way of united male and female.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and we specifically need not to think we actually get misguided if we start thinking of that in terms of materialist terms and tie it to biological sex. That's not what's being talked about.
No.
That
Right.
is not what St. Paul meant when he said there is neither Jew nor Greek, male nor female. He didn't mean that difference goes away. What he meant is that Christ is the natural identity of natural identity and natural difference. Like his hypothesis unites both. So you remain one and many, but you are fundamentally one in Christ, and in Christ is the operative term. And I had to say that because I keep hearing that saying of Paul is misinterpreted in this corner of the internet really, really badly consistently lately, and so I just wanted to stamp that down because that's a materialist.
We appreciate your effort.
Yeah.
But I think it's, and this is why it's, I think, in a submerged reality, I talk about reading Burma in a way that's holographic, right? Where you're not really being rational and you're not being rational, and you kind of enter into an intuitive, like you said with in the beginning. Here's how we're tying it in the beginning about giving advice, right? Where you're not giving advice, you're not giving advice.
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of being present so you can see the whole picture. And that's that kind of short circuiting, I think, was really useful, because what we're trying to do here is we're trying to rationalize something that can't be rationalized.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
he can't help it.
That's exactly
rational language to do it, right?
That's exactly.
Let me read this. Let me read this, Nate, because he says at the bottom of page 377, here I do not want to say anything either for or against what Swedenborg says concerning the sex of angels. But what I would like to portray here is the maternal love of guardian angels, and that there are other angels who represent paternal love and also fraternal love.
Yeah.
So that, it's not that they're feminine or masculine. It's that they represent.
And the category of sex is just a non sequitur when we're talking about angels.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah. To think of angels as entities, in whom prevails either the tenderness of maternal love or the justice of paternal love. So yeah. For what it is a matter of, well, I don't know why that doesn't make sense to me. For what it is a matter of is not to project earthly sexuality upon heaven, but rather, on the contrary, to see in the former a reflection, although often disfigured, of the polarity from above.
Well, look at the craziness that ensues if you think because we talk about we have an experience of God's paternal love, and we talk about God analogically as Father. People then jump from that to God is male. That's a theological disaster.
I want to go back a little bit to what Michael said about the old boys club thing, because I think there's something to that. And what came to my mind was, and I know that it's not perfect, because I've talked to my priest about this, and the role of women in the church is lacking, in his opinion, as well as mine. But the Orthodox wedding ceremony is, I find, very interesting, because there's a portion of the weddings. Well, first of all, the woman isn't given by the father to the husband, so there's no concept of women as chattel in the Orthodox wedding ceremony. She gives herself freely, and then they wear crowns, the man and the wife, and during the ceremony, the crowns are exchanged several times onto the heads. So they each have authority in each other's lives. And that authority will switch places, if you want to put it that way, at different times in their lives. And so, I mean, that was one of the things that really appealed to me about Orthodoxy was the wedding ceremony and the equal footing that the woman and the man are given in the relationship, and the fact that the woman is not seen as chattel.
That seems to almost image the Trinitarian perichoresis to me, especially since it has this like dance and movement like quality to it. But that was just
Right.
that was my
And it's
intuition
also,
when I heard you talking about that.
I just did an Orthodox wedding last month when my son married a Greek girl, and another beautiful part of it is at the after they're married, that they bring the priest
Yep.
brings the couple to both parents to kiss. You know, so my daughter-in-law kissed for the first time right then, and of course my son kissed his in-laws. You know, because it unites the families, which is a kind of a beautiful moment.
Yeah.
But
it
it's
is.
also Trinitarian, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you think about it. I mean, it's everything right there.
Yeah, that's yeah. I'm glad I'm not the only one who saw that as somehow
But what
Trinitarian.
I guess the thing that I'm wondering about is because, as far as I know, like I don't know about the Middle East, but you know, in India, a woman is inferior to a man, right? And most countries, that is the case, from what I can see. And if Neoplatonism is the reason for like this old boys club that you were talking about, Michael, or the Platonic image of the woman, where, like, is this a purely Christian interpretation of coming from, you know, the Orthodox wedding ceremony? Like, where did that come from? That's my question.
I mean, it's not like all of a piece, right? And I think that's with
I
the
guess.
Neoplatonism that some say is in Christianity is just, I mean, it's just a product of their time, right?
Mhm.
And Saint Augustine among them, right? They were educated, and those who were educated in a Platonic system, right, or a Platonic paradigm. It's just
Yeah.
how it was. So and I think what happened, this is just my interpretation, is that in the quest for legitimacy in the eyes of the culture, they learned how to speak the language, right?
Mhm.
And there are good things about that, bad things about that. But I think, and I read about this in Sophia in Exile, in the weird interpretations of the Song of Songs, which try to make it's never about what it actually says. It's always, this is actually a metaphor between God and the soul. Well, yes, but it sounds like it's about a man and a woman to me. Oh, no, it's not about that. That's dirty. Wait a minute. And there's a whole history of exegesis about that that's just nuts, and goes back, even predates Christianity, and they were part of that with the rabbis. But as Margaret Barker would argue, you know, and as you in the Kabbalah, for instance. So here, the great example in Christianity, at least in Catholicism and Orthodoxy, married clergy are not to engage in sexual relations with their wives
Mhm.
the night before the liturgy. I don't know why. What's going to spoil it? Going to wreck it? What's it going to taint it? It's going to make it dirty? But on the other hand, in Hasidic Judaism and the Kabbalah, if a man and his wife have sexual intercourse on the Sabbath, they see it as a prefiguring of the reunion of God and his Shekinah.
You're supposed to, actually. It's encouraged.
Yes. So come on. So
Mhm.
that seems a lot more biblical and rational to me than what I take to be a Platonic insertion into Christian theology with the Orthodox and Catholic prohibition.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Got
Yeah.
real quiet in here all of a sudden.
Well, no, I was thinking. I'm thinking because I just like.
I'm thinking too.
Yeah. I think that.
Sorry,
There's
Ortho Bros.
Well, yeah. There's. I think that it depends on the. It depends on the Neoplatonism, right? Because you also have like, well, you also have like Saint Maximus the Confessor in Ambiguum 41, like one of the five dualities of being that he sees as being overcome eschatologically is the duality of male and female. Now that doesn't mean that you turn it into some sort of you don't interpret this through some sort of materialist monism, as in you create a genderless species on a material level, right? Because here's why. Because the union that happens between in Christ is between unlike natures, right? Divine and human, male, and all the way down the line into male and female. So that means that it achieves that union by turning the duality into polarity, I would say, which is how it turns. This is how it relates to what Tomberg is saying in this text. It's understanding this difference between a polarity and a duality.
Right.
And there's
and Tomberg does the same thing with the circle versus the spiral. It's kind of the same thing.
Poles have a sort of perichoretic motion with one another, which is what is symbolized in the Orthodox marriage ceremony. So even though Orthodox theology sometimes has said really awful things about women, for sure, I would agree with you, Michael, you can still see a symbolic representation in the marriage ceremony of something that is profoundly right.
Right, I agree. I agree. So, but here's the thing I'm saying, though, is the way things usually get adapted like that, there's theory and there's practice, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the theory. So when I was growing up in Catholic school, right, the theory was marriage is just as valid a vocation as being in holy orders, and practice is what basically. Well, marriage is, if you can't do holy orders, do marriage, right? Which is not the same thing as equal. And I think you get this when the people calling the shots are monastic. They're just like, and it's not like anything, it's just like everything else in the world. They try to recreate the little sector of the internet in their image, right? Just like in academia or in education, education is created with higher education as the model, right? The winners. Who are the winners and losers going through K through 12? Well, the kids who go to college and go to university, right? It's because they're all university educated and bred, and they recreate the image, the system in their likeness, right? It's just how it is. I mean, it's a human characteristic, not a good one, but it's a human characteristic to do that.
Yeah, well, like I'm thinking right now about, I think we talked about this quite a while ago, but Nate said something like, of course, we need to revisit the role of women in the church, but now, in the atmosphere that we have, wouldn't be a good time for that, right? Because it could.
Well, they've been saying for 2,000 years.
Materialism has to be dead first.
Yeah,
to be honest with you,
I agree with that because.
Well,
and who knows? I mean, I'm not trying to excuse anything, but I'm just saying that. Like when I think back to
I think
Gregory of Nyssa, for example, being, and Saint Basil, both being taught by their sister Macrina, and she had such an important role in their lives, and they gave her that authority in their lives, right?
Right.
And I think in the early days of the church, the women had greater roles. Like I talked to my priest, we talked about this, and it's true. There were deaconesses, and there were women who had authority.
And there I thought that St. Bridget, for instance, was a bishop, right?
Yeah, and then somehow culturally, and with the corruption of institutions, it just got diluted and
and it did. We know how to screw things up over here, but now, I mean, I think this is interesting because I think and this is slightly related to the topic at hand, but with the attempt through some jurisdictions and the Episcopal Church, for instance, trying to rectify that by making women priests and bishops and stuff. Or Lutherans, I think, do the same thing. Some Lutherans jurisdictions, but I could never stand it because I think it turns the priesthood into a gender neutral job, right? Which I think it destroys the exact thing that we're talking about here with regards to the the gender, the maternal qualities of the guardian angel versus the paternal qualities, say, of Saint Michael. And so I can never get with. I mean, in principle, I like the idea, but it always kind of be gender neutral, which is almost like the trans phenomenon, right? Which
it doesn't give
you're
credence
neither
to
one.
either.
You're fish nor fowl. You're neither one or the other.
Right.
And though, until I have to say this, in Jesus' Imagination #5 on the Divine Feminine, I got this great essay from Alison Milbank, who is married to John Milbank, and she's an Anglican priest. And she prefers the term priestess, which none of her compatriots are down with at all. And she wrote this great, I'll have to read what the title is. I just happen to have it right here. The title is...
Oh, we lost you for some.
You actually turned your camera off, Mike.
Did I? Oh, there it goes. Is it back?
No.
No, I'm not seeing it.
Oh, I got to do this button down here. I don't like that button.
Did we lose him now?
There's a on the control panel and
I see it.
The app. There's a stop cam button. If you hit that, no problem.
Okay.
Well, you can go ahead and talk. And
anyway, yeah. Well, anyway, her title is "Oiling the Wheels of the Heavenly Chariot: Female Priesthood and the Divine Feminine," and it's just a beautiful, beautiful essay on the priesthood as feminine charism, right? And I think it's gorgeous that she does this. I still can't see myself. Whatever. So.
You can always go out and come back in. Try something like that.
Oh, yeah, he just tried that.
Was fast.
That's what he tried to do. So I'm going to try to circle back to some of the. I mean, I understand how we got on this topic because of what was about the discussion of maternal love and
gender neutrality
and gender and gender of angels and all that stuff. So that is in the text. Although what he's more concerned with here is what the guardian angel, who's depicted on the card, the temperance card, what they're doing. Do you have anything to say about that, Sherry?
You mean what the angel is actually doing, like pouring the?
Yeah, like what how he reads the meaning of like the angel's action, which is like holding these two vases at a 485-degree angle and having water flow from one to the other, which he ends up tying to the concept of inspiration.
Right. Well, you touched on this briefly at the beginning there, where he talks about the twofold polarity.
Mm-hmm.
And let me see here. Holding the two vases, one red and one blue, and making water gush in a mysterious way from one vase to the other, is he not the one who bears the good news that beyond the duality of either or, there is or is possible still that of not only, but also, or both and? Does not the totality of the card, the angel of the card, suggest the problem of cooperating polarity or integrated duality?
Right. So it's not, so you're moving, so specifically he is saying that what inspiration is about is moving beyond the duality. This actually remember the conversation we had with Tyler about saying yes to the no? Mm-hmm. That's precisely the kind of thing that Tyler was in talking about saying yes to the no. He was trying to see beyond the yes-no binary, the yes-no duality.
Yeah.
Towards something that he expressed as saying yes to the no. That's the same kind of idea that Tomberg is talking about here.
Right. So he goes on to say, does it not first of all suggest the presentiment or suspicion that perhaps it is thanks to the two wings, the two arms, the two colors of the robe, the two vases, and that the water pours forth? That this water is the fruit and the gift of the both and of integrated duality, which jumps to one's attention as one looks at the card.
And I think the best way to talk about, I really think, and this is probably because I'm getting ready to talk to Jordan Daniel Wood right after this, and I've been reading his book, but it's hard for me not to think about that in Christological terms, because that's what Christ does.
Yeah.
Like he unites those things in himself, which is how he becomes all in all.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. I mean, like you said, he starts talking about that, and I thought he was going to get into it more, but he kind of left it behind.
I don't know if there's more to say. I think that might be because it is a mystery, right? I mean, it's ultimately
maybe what would be interesting to read is the Pierre, how do you say, Chardin, Teilhard de Chardin?
Yes.
Quote at the very beginning. He says, "By upbringing and intellectual training, I belong to the children of heaven. But by temperament and by my professional studies, I am a child of the earth. Situated thus by life at the heart of two worlds, with whose theory, idiom, and feelings intimate experience has made me familiar, I have not erected any watertight bulkhead inside myself. On the contrary, I have allowed two apparently conflicting influences, full freedom, to react upon one another deep within me." And this is, I personally feel that, like, some people need, that gives you a sense of uncertainty or unknowing, right? And some people will try to resolve it so that they have that certainty. But this is what I talk about when I'm talking about walking on water. It's like he says there, allowing the two conflicting influences full freedom to react one upon the other. And I think when that happens, that's precisely where you get deep insights.
Right.
Michael having trouble getting on?
Yeah, I'm trying to. He's like, I see him in here, but it won't let me. I can't let him in because his mic can't and cam is not. So I sent him a message I sent him a direct message. Hopefully he'll.
That's what happened to me.
Hopefully he'll get it. So hopefully he's able to join us again. Can you? I'm sorry, Sherry, but I was like trying to deal with the get Michael back in the chat. Can you repeat what you just said?
Well, I was just saying that, this allowing these two apparently conflicting influences full freedom to react upon one another is what I describe as walking on water, right?
Right.
And a lot of people feel the need to dismiss that, like not have that happening inside of them because they can't handle the conflict, essentially.
Right. Well, and also because they want to have either activity or passivity, and as Tom Berg says here, what he's talking about happens through an active passivity, right? So, which ties us back to the first Arcanum, honestly.
Yeah,
like that's what he's talking about is the concentration without effort that is characterized by the Arcanum of the magician.
But I find, but what I did say though previously too is that I find that if you can hold that tension, if you can allow those two conflicting things to how does he put it, react upon one another, I feel like that's where you get your deepest insights, right? Because this is how I see apokatastasis, actually, Nate.
Well, it's also, absolutely. And it's like you don't say you can't, it's impossible to know, and you don't say I have it all figured out. Right?
Which is what happened in my conversation.
You have to have boldness. You have to have boldness. And he says actually a childlike boldness, right? In asking your questions. But at the same time, you need to have the humility to not think you already have the answers.
Well, I liked the way he phrased it there, because I phrased it there that way too. You have to know that you have to live in this cloud of unknowing, right? But you have to also know that everything is knowable.
Correct.
And And I have said that mystery does not mean that you just have to, you will never know and you have to go with it, which is what a lot of Protestantism says.
And that everything is
Mystery-
knowable is not just in the realm of fact. That's important too.
Yeah, mystery to me is it signifies a deep well. That's all it is, you know. And if you want to go down that, you're going to fall for, well, ever probably. You know, you're just going to keep going down, right, into profundity. That's what mystery means. It doesn't mean it's not knowable. It's the contrary. It's knowable, but you need a lot of courage and humility to make that leap, right? I think.
Right. And he tells us, like, so how it's known, like that's the pathway that he says for how you come to know it is what he talks about when he's talking about the three different crosses that Michael was referring to, and also this idea of what he calls as tears and sweat and blood.
Yeah.
Do either of you want to like elucidate that at all?
Tears, sweat, and blood.
Yeah.
I've used all three. Yeah.
Me too.
When you live on a farm, it's like your motto. It's like your mantra. Totally is, you know. Maybe, Nate, before we get to the tears, sweat, and blood, I wanted to talk a little bit about his idea of Mary and Martha, because I've always had okay, so I have a sister. I have a sister and we're very close, and my sister is a Mary, and I always thought of myself as a Martha. Okay. And my sister, you know, like she's artistic. She's very extroverted. I'm the opposite. I'm an introvert. And so you know, when people are around, she's doing music. She's, you know, her and her husband do music together, and you know, the room is vibrant, and everybody is there's some kind of spiritual nurturing going on when my sister is around, which is what Mary did, right? She's washing Jesus's feet with her hair, and, you know, doing all that. And then there's Martha in the kitchen, just grumbling away because, you know, nobody's helping her. And that's me, right? That was me for a long time. And I have to say, like, it's kind of embarrassing to admit this, but I didn't know that I had a Mary in me. I didn't know. I thought I was just a Martha. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I just thought I was a Martha. And it was only recently that I found the Mary in me. But anyway, I just want to read this. Because I think it's interesting. So he's talking about the fluid, right? The fluid in the cups that the angel is, you know, putting back and forth. So it says, this is why tradition has given the name temperance to the 14th arcanum of the tarot, for it is a matter here of the measure in the fluidic relationship between the image and the likeness, which is necessary for life and health. Just measure in the fluidic relationship between the absolute radicalism of the monad, the image, and the relativism of the phenomenal personality, the likeness, constitutes the fundamental principle of spiritual, psychic, and corporeal health. This measure amounts to an always changing equilibrium between eternity and the moment. It's so good. Between the absolute and the relative, between contemplation and action, between the ideal and the phenomenal. Many relevant things can be said concerning the polarity of Mary and Martha, and have indeed been said. But we, all of us, live a healthy life only inasmuch as the two sisters in us are present and active as sisters, i.e. that they collaborate.
Right.
No one can dispense with the Mary in himself, nor equally with the Martha in himself, and remain healthy in spirit, soul, and body.
That's Tomberg's way of affirming your don't be so heavenly minded, you're no earthly good.
No earthly good. And the thing is, like, when I did the personality test through Jordan Peterson, I found out that I was equally conscientious and as I was openness to experience, or his whatever that other category is. And And that was an eye-opener for me, because like that, to me, the openness, the creative is the Mary, and the conscientiousness is Martha. Okay. And I always knew that I was putting my creativeness on hold, because I would often have this longing to be creative in my day, but duty calls right over here. I was constantly battling with these two sisters, you know. And I have found, so when I did that test and I found out that I was equally conscientious and creative, then I literally made the decision to divide my day into equal portions of creativity and duty. And I found an equilibrium that I had never experienced in my life until then. And still do, because I keep that. So anyway, I just wanted to validate what he said here, because it's true.
Yeah. But I think what he's getting at too, I mean, it's a kind of, you know, he's haunted by Hegel, right? Which is, I mean, polarity. The idea of polarity is also haunted by Hegel. You're trying to find synthesis, and this is a big thing with Steiner too. And when he says here on the bottom of page 387, he's talking about blood, sweat, and tears, which he connects to the three crosses. But only tears are inclined to quietism or illuminism. Those who prefer sweat, that is the effort of will, easily fall into the Pelagian heresy of denying grace. And those who seek the mystery only in the blood often arrive at the Lutheran heresy, where work, that is effort, counts for nothing. But the mystery, I repeat, is whole and indivisible: tears, sweat, and blood, engagement, trial, and wedding, faith, hope, and love. So you need all three. And but also you're talking about Martha and Mary, which I think is the other thing, right? And you mentioned earlier the cloud of unknowing.
Right.
Now, I did kind of a minor specialty in graduate school on English mysticism, and that was a big impulse in medieval mysticism. Was what's the point of monasticism, right? Is it contemplation or service, right? And so there are, as you see, even to this day, some orders in Catholic churches are voted primarily to contemplation, like the Carmelites, for instance, and some are devoted primarily to service, like the Franciscans, or to teaching, like the Dominicans. And actually, this came out of the conference on Dostoevsky in Washington, D.C., and we were talking about the place of monasticism in that Russian culture that's depicted in the book. And one of the things I brought up was Vladimir Soloviev talked about what's the role of mysticism, or not mysticism, monasticism. And because in the early church, the monastics were out in the desert, right, doing their desert fathers thing. And Soloviev made a great observation. He said, no, when Christ sent the apostles out, he sent them into the world and not into the desert, which I think is a great insight. But still, and this is the thing that's going on in the Middle Ages, and I think what Tomberg is kind of drawing on is the idea of the mixed life, which is the life that is both contemplation and work, or ora et labora, right? And that's what he's trying to resolve here in his discussion of blood, sweat, and tears, because you do see people who are inclined, doing my own thing over here, doing quietism, which I appreciate it, but how do you and actually this is, I think he would say, this is the path of the Hermeticist, is a mixed life that is both contemplative but active at the same time, right? You're in the world, you're not outside of the world. He had a job, he worked every day, right? You're listening to radio broadcasts, which that'd be a horrible job, to make me listen to the radio all day for a job. But he was doing the translations, looking for interesting things to tell the what do they call it, M13 or something in Great Britain, and
I think
that mixed life, and I think this is what Steiner was getting on too. Is how do we have But for Tomberg, it becomes a Catholic thing. How do you have a mixed life of both contemplation and action? And
specifically, it has to be a combination of theology and anthropology, which is what Steiner is going for in anthroposophy, and then Tomberg is trying to do this in through Hermeticism underneath the Catholic umbrella.
Right.
But it's definitely like it has to combine both anthropology and theology.
Well, the way I do it, because I do that. I work and contemplate. And I do that on my farm, but I've also done that in a job in town, working in a grocery store. And I think it's just a question of mindfulness, of being mindful. I think he talks, let me see if I can find it. He talks somewhere about something like that I liked. But just go ahead and talk, guys, because I don't know if I'll find it.
Okay, so I see Luke asked a question, or not a question, so it's a comment. He said, it's noble, but not comprehensive or encapsulable. You see it. He said that a while back. But I think, and Luke likes to talk about vision a lot. So maybe if he's listening, that's one of the, Tomberg in this chapter, or in this letter, he talks about vision, inspiration, and intuition. And ultimately, he says that temperance is tied to inspiration, but he does talk about all three. Do we want to say anything about what he says about those things and the relationship between them?
Okay, before we jump to
that,
and
they are related to the three crosses.
Thought, yeah. I found my thing here, and it's the praying unceasingly. The key to that is this. What I'm talking about when I'm talking about mindfulness. Yeah, presence. Yeah. So it's like, how does he put it here? It manifests itself above all and in general as a constant orientation of consciousness towards God. And that's exactly how I've put it. That, that your face is towards God, right? You have and that doesn't have to appear pious in any way. Like, seriously not.
Well, he also talks about the way that can actually become integrated into the subconscious or the astral and psychical bodies, and the body as well. And he talks about like some of the. He talks about hesychasm is what he does. And he talks about how,
because
it shows how perpetual prayer is actually possible.
I remember being involved in conversations with this, little corner of the internet about praying, and how often should you pray, and how should you pray, and what should you pray about, and I always had the sense that I was always praying, and everything in my day was always that I was actually doing what Paul said. And it wasn't a conscious thing. It wasn't like I was crawling around on my knees, in any kind of position, but everything was oriented towards God. Everything that I was thinking about and everything that I was doing, I was, I don't know how else to explain it. So anyway, I don't even know why we started talking. What was it? What was it that I said before?
What was your question?
What was my question? Oh my God. Anyway, it's just the key there, I think, to I just like that what he said. It manifests itself above all and in general as a constant orientation of consciousness towards God. That's praying without ceasing to me. So, and then you had something you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about, to see if anyone had anything to say about what he says about vision and inspiration and intuition and the three rose crosses.
Well, let's read what he says about the crosses first.
Mm-hmm.
There are three ways. This is page 390. There are three ways of seeing the cross: the crucifix, the rose cross, and the gilded cross bearing a rose of silver. The crucifix is the greatest treasure of vision. It is the vision of the divine and human love. The black cross with a rose blossoming from it is the treasure of inspiration. This is divine and human love speaking in the soul. The gilded cross bearing a rose of silver is the treasure of intuition. This is love transforming the soul. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I've read a lot of this kind of literature before, and this was the first in I've ever read anything about a gilded cross with a rose. Does anybody?
No, I haven't heard of it.
Yeah. So I don't know if that was his original contribution or not, but that's kind of always struck me is where'd that come from? Where'd that come from?
But the way he describes intuition is an incredibly profound way of describing intuition that certainly goes beyond like other anthroposophic. I can't say that word.
Anthroposophic.
Anthroposophic thoughts about intuition. So, like for yeah. M.L. Bach just describes it as intuition as like the spiritual sense of touch. But Tomberg actually suggests that intuition is the name of the operation which allows you to become the other. That's what is intuition for him. And Sherry, that's also one of the reasons I thought about you so much when I was reading this chapter, because you model that so consistently well in dialogue.
I feel it too, because I have this, like, I have an empathy, right? That draws me into the other person's shoes, and I feel like I'm inhabiting their body, and then I feel like I know too much about them. It's terrible. It's burdensome, actually. But yeah.
You lose yourself, I think, in the other person. It's not even that you lose yourself in a negative way. It's that the distinction between me and the other becomes irrelevant. So, like, let me illustrate it this way. It's a unity of a multiplicity. It's a unity of two things. It's an at-one-ment with retained difference. And so last night we had this big house party, and whatever, it was my birthday. So this isn't the point, but I'm using it as context for the illustration. And so my wife, and so it was all these people from all these different parts of my life that I don't interact with a ton anymore because life is busy and I'm middle-aged. And so it's all these people from all these different touch points in my life, a lot of whom did not know each other. And then my wife like had a cheers thing where everyone kind of went around the room and just talked about how they knew me and said really nice, positive things about me. And so, and part of this is my own temperament where I was trying to explain it to my wife this morning because we were just recapping the night. It was this long, big night, and people don't have parties like that anymore, and it was great. And I was saying, there's this weird, potentially kind of egoic thing where I'm sitting in the middle of a room and the center of attention, and people are saying nice things about me and I'm kind of comfortable in that. And part of that's just my temperament, but also it could come across as egoic. But I said, it's not even really that for me. I said I said this earlier in the comments, it's almost like a presence. Because when I was in there, what I thought of explaining it to Jen this morning is that C.S. Lewis quote of humility is not thinking less of yourself, but it's thinking of yourself less. When I was sitting there last night, I wasn't thinking about myself at all, really. Like I was thinking about the person that was talking about me and our relationship and what that means to me. And I was seeing it's almost like a mirroring. I don't know. I've been talking to Sherry recently about mirrors. Like it came up. I've been thinking about this recently because I've been reading Cormac McCarthy's new book, which is basically about consciousness, as far as I can tell, and the unconscious and consciousness. And I was like, Cormac, I said this to Sherry in some audio, but I was like, Cormac is a mirror. And I think there's a reason that the mirror is a symbol and a reality. I would say it's not just a sign; it's a symbol of what it means to be a person or a human being or something. And like that was happening last night. There was some kind of mirroring going on where it was about me, and I was there, but it wasn't just about me. It was a harmony. You know, it was I don't know how to describe it, but it's a loss of distinction between the subjective objective. You know, you're not even it wasn't even egoic. I wasn't even thinking about because in order for it to be egoic, you have to abstract and distance yourself from the experience.
Mhm.
You know, you have to be thinking about it in a way that like I wasn't at all, like I was there. I mean, that's presence, I think.
Mhm.
I don't know
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
So what's interesting is that Tomberg, what he says that the purpose of vision and inspiration is to lead to intuition. So like intuition is actually like higher.
Yeah.
Then he also says, this is the interesting bit. He also says that you don't want to just jump to essentially having just a religion of straight resurrection that misses. So the other parts, even though he says intuition is the highest, he essentially says that you need all three. And that you can't just eliminate the other two, because if you do that, essentially then you have just resurrection. And you don't have the cross.
Well, he says on the bottom of page 391, he says inspiration is the principle acting in tears, just like weeping. Inspiration takes place in the guise of, quote, flowing between two vases. In inspiration, whatever its true source of origin may be, a flow is active, which is produced between the higher self or image and the lower self or likeness. So perhaps, I don't know, I'm just guessing, but that might be where the mirror comes handy. Right?
So you can see this in the Grail question. Vision, you see the suffering of the king, right? Inspiration, you have the courage to ask the question. Intuition, you actually learn to identify with the suffering of the king. And that's in what that is how you actually achieve the Grail. Is through that achieving that intuition of identification, self-identification in the suffering and becoming the suffering king.
Yeah, he says here there is
Exactly.
a flow which results from the simultaneous collaboration of the higher I and the lower I. This means to say that higher understanding and lower understanding being in contact vibrate in unison, each with its own voice and in terms of its own language, and thus together produce a concrete inspiration. He also refers to the higher I as ear or the lower I as ear as well, which makes me think of Matthias Desmet's whole idea of resonance, and that the body is a stringed instrument, and that in development, when a child is developing, I love how he says it, the clinging and clanging of the mother's being reveal the well and the woe. No, I can't think of it. The clinging and clanging of her voice reveal the well and the woe of her being to the child, because he's talking about resonance, right? And how the child, when he imitates her expression, he actually feels whatever it is, joy or joy. Excuse me, my voice and the telephone are going at the same time. If she's happy and the child imitates that expression of happiness,
where'd you get that ringtone?
Joy, right? and vice versa. So.
Yeah, it's hard. So I feel like it's hard. These things are always hard to talk about, and and I think the reason why, and I've been repeating this constantly, but Dr. Martin has never heard it because I haven't had the privilege of fangirling and talking to you like this before. But I always love to quote this person. I won't even say the person because I don't want to trigger people. But God is he about whom we must never speak, and we must always keep speaking. I love, Sherry said something the other day, and I can't remember the context exactly, but she was saying when you get to a certain level of, I don't know what the word is, awareness or understanding or vision, all you can really do somewhat, a mystic, I suppose, is speak in riddles or like koans. And increasingly, I find that of myself. If I'm trying to explain something to someone, I just say a Lukeism paradox because I don't know how to say it any more simply. And and I love that quote about God because I think it's true.
So, oh, we lost the. So I just wanted to point out to me, like, this idea of inspiration, right? The way that Tomberg talks about it, it really ties to the idea that from scriptures of the idea of lean not on your own understanding, because that's what's happened. Because in the process of inspiration, as Tomberg is talking about it, it's not, you're not relying just on yourself to get an answer to the question. You're open, you have that active passivity to be able to receive that answer.
Well, here's a question about inspiration, because he says tears are the element proper to inspiration, and he who is moved to weep inwardly or outwardly is not important, before a crucifix is already inspired by it. So if tears are the element proper to inspiration, how do you end up with tears? Like, I kind of think I know the answer when I ask the question, but I don't know if I'm sure. And it's like, I just, it's like, well, it's suffering. Like, suffering is what moves people to tears, right? Either they're in pain, or they're feeling compassionate, or they, but it's all through suffering in some way that we acquire tears.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the only way. There's also beauty.
Okay, that's true.
Yeah, because he does talk about, he actually talks about it in terms of both joy and suffering, right?
Mm-hmm.
The suffering of joy and the joy of suffering.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's where, like, that bizarre polarity is actually where you find the tears.
yeah, I mean, because I cried when my mother was dying, and at my son's wedding, right, recently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, that's right. Because the gift of tears is the commingling of joy and sorrow. Okay, so that's true. Yeah. So it's suffering and beauty, which is revealed in the cross, really, right? Completely. Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to check here because I have some question marks.
Okay, let's hear them.
Oh, I know. I just thought we really have to read what he says about Calvin and Luther. We have to read that out loud for everybody.
We have to read him driving the bus over both of them. Go for it.
Well, I think it's a great insight.
I apologize to our Protestant friends.
Well, I don't apologize, because if you can't,
we're gonna get mail from Paul Vanderklay. I'll tell you that.
Okay,
Sorry,
so
Paul.
I'm just going to read this little section here on page 396. So he's talking about Luther here. Individual psychological experiences, including the experience of setbacks and disillusions in the realm of aspiring to inspiration, have played an enormous role in the catastrophic upheavals which have taken place in the history of Christianity. Thus, an Augustinian monk of the 16th century ardently desired inspiration. To this end, he practiced the rigorous asceticism of fasting, mortification of the flesh, and vigils of prayer. He believed that effort would procure inspiration for him, but he had none. Then, disillusioned as he was, he advanced the doctrine of the vanity of work, of all effort. Faith alone suffices for salvation. Here lies the origin of Lutheran Protestantism. In the same century, a doctor of law underwent a sudden conversion, from which he concluded that inspiration is the work of God and God alone, without any participation of human effort and freedom. It is God and God alone who has chosen for all eternity those whom he has predestined to salvation amongst the mass predestined to perdition. Here lies the origin of Calvinist Protestantism. If Martin Luther and John Calvin had known that inspiration is activity and passivity, or effort and grace simultaneously, the one would not have seen man as only a sinner, and the other would not have conceived God as a cosmic tyrant. St. John of the Cross was needed to show that one can pass by the darkness and aridity of the senses and of the mind without drawing back and without despair, just as one can effect a profound reform, in the sense of the practice of the poverty and moral radicalism of the Gospels, without at the same time attacking the unity of the Church. In truth, St. John of the Cross atoned for Martin Luther. Yet another saint, Ignatius of Loyola, was needed to demonstrate that man can choose God and his cause in the full freedom of love instead of being chosen by God, and that just as Jacob wrestled until the break of day, saying, I will not let you go unless you bless me, so can each free human will, chosen or not, embrace the cause of God voluntarily and will be blessed by God. St. Ignatius of Loyola atoned for John Calvin by living in the voluntary obedience of love for the God of love instead of the obedience of a poor wretch before the power of the Almighty. So I just thought that was those were really good comparisons of what you were talking about before, Michael. That was it, Ora et Labora.
Laura, yeah.
Yeah.
Pray and work.
I like that he says it's
No, it's a funny thing. I got a funny story for you. So my brother-in-law, this is maybe 12 years ago, he and his wife went to live in Missouri to go to I think it was a Calvinist college or Presbyterian college, or so he could get a master's degree in theology, and they had a good thing for married couples. He was shocked because he came from a Baptist background that so many of these people were smoking and drinking and stuff. I said, well, why were you shocked? I said, well, I didn't think they would act like that. I said, well, but they're the elect. They're like, well, we're the elect. We can do what we want to do, right? And so that's been kind of a joke in our family ever since then. Well, fuck it, we're the elect. Which is kind of a weird thing, right?
There is that to it. Like, I know a lot of people in that camp would disagree with you strongly that they still need sanctification, right? But I have seen it play out subconsciously in people's lives where they fall into addiction, for example, with somewhat of a guarantee of salvation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really sad.
Yeah, I'm working out my salvation in fear and trembling. Where did I read that before?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So they fall into addiction because of I didn't quite.
They fall
Are you
into
saying
addiction.
that because of their own assurance of their salvation, it causes them to fall into addiction? Is that what you're saying?
No, I think it plays off of each. I think it's something that plays off of of the two things, right? It's like there's room because you're elect. You have the way I see it is you've got a ticket. You're getting in, right? As long as you got that ticket, you're good. And then you in the case of some of the people I know, they have fallen into addiction because they gave themselves permission because they're elect, if that makes any sense.
Okay, gotcha. So that's interesting. That's interesting. I could also see it happening. I could also I could also see it happening where you absorb because that theology holds humanity in such low regard. I could also see people fall into it just because of like really low self-worth that comes in through their theology.
Yeah.
If you believe that you are filthy rag, right? Then
no, we said we were talking about saints atoning for them. It's all good. They've been forgiven.
If you believe you're a filthy rag, I just don't see
because
how
of the elect. That's why.
Act it out at some point.
Sherry and Michael, if you guys are interested, in continuing the conversation, you guys can keep it going, but I gotta bow out because I gotta get ready because I
have to too.
I got a second conversation. So, all right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. It is sincerely appreciated.
And I'll see you two on Tuesday. I'll see you two on Tuesday, right?
Tuesday. Yes.
Looking forward to it.
That's right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.